Hungary, a country that has long stood as a cornerstone of the European Union, now appears to be drifting eastward, toward Russia, toward China, and potentially into the orbit of BRICS. Once considered the EU's black sheep, Hungary is now on the brink of a significant geopolitical shift. The stakes are high, and the pressing question is, why? Why is Hungary willing to risk alienating its European partners in favor of closer ties with Eastern powers? What's driving this dramatic pivot, and what might it mean for Europe, NATO, and the global order as a whole? Since joining the EU in 2004, Hungary has benefited from integration into Europe's political and economic structures. But in recent years, under Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, the country has pursued policies that increasingly clash with the EU's foundational values. The Union is built on shared principles, democracy, rule of law, and individual freedoms. But Orbán's government has moved in a different direction, asserting national sovereignty over EU oversight, and resisting what it sees as overreach from Brussels. Issues like judicial independence, press freedom, and the protection of traditional values have become flashpoints. Many Hungarians who support the current government believe their country is defending conservative Christian values against a progressive EU agenda. That belief is reflected in public sentiment, with support for the EU plummeting from 80% a decade ago to just 47% today. In Orbán's view, the EU no longer looks like Hungary's most reliable partner. Facing increasing pressure from European institutions, Hungary has started looking elsewhere for allies, turning toward Russia and China in search of partnerships that promise respect for sovereignty and less interference in domestic affairs. This isn't just a rhetorical shift, it's a deep transformation in foreign policy. Hungary has signed new trade deals with both countries and became the first EU nation to join China's Belt and Road Initiative, a vast infrastructure and investment project stretching across Asia, Europe, and beyond. While Hungary hopes to gain economically from this alignment, the deeper ties to Chinese interests have raised concerns about losing independence and undermining its position within the EU. These moves have rattled Brussels. The EU has long sought a united foreign policy among its members, but Hungary's increasingly independent stance threatens that cohesion. This isn't just about new trade routes, it's about ideology. Hungary's eastward tilt suggests that the divide in Europe is no longer only economic or political, but philosophical, with different visions of governance and global alignment pulling member states in opposing directions. Hungary's growing engagement with BRICS, an alliance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, adds another layer to this strategic realignment. BRICS has emerged as a powerful counterbalance to Western-dominated institutions, with its member states gaining influence on the global stage. In 2022, BRICS countries accounted for 31% of global GDP, surpassing the G7. For Hungary, the bloc offers access to fast-growing markets, potential investment, and a place in an alternative global framework. Aligning more closely with BRICS could offer Hungary a more prominent international role and economic advantages that it feels are lacking in its current relationship with the EU. But this pivot comes with serious complications, especially in the realm of energy. Despite the EU's sanctions on Russia following the invasion of Ukraine, Hungary continues to rely heavily on Russian natural gas. With about 85% of its imports still coming from Russia, the government argues that energy security must come first. This position has created significant friction with other EU members, who view continued engagement with Moscow as undermining collective European efforts to isolate Russia. The situation puts Hungary in a difficult spot, dependent on Russian energy while trying to maintain its position in a bloc that's increasingly hostile to the Kremlin. This balancing act between East and West reveals the high-stakes nature of Hungary's current path. It's not just about economics or energy. It's about the future direction of the country and potentially the continent. Hungary's choices are already testing the cohesion of the EU and could pave the way for a broader ideological shift across Europe. Whether this marks the beginning of a new political landscape or an outlier in European politics remains to be seen. But one thing is clear: Hungary is no longer just following Europe's lead. It's trying to chart a path of its own. Hungary is undergoing a significant shift in its foreign policy, distancing itself from EU sanctions and seeking to minimize Russian influence, while also taking a controversial stance on military aid to Ukraine. In the midst of the ongoing war, Hungary vetoed EU military support to Ukraine, arguing that continued aid could escalate the conflict and threaten its own national security. This move has strained Hungary's relationships not only with the EU but also with NATO, raising concerns about its commitment to the alliance's collective defense goals. Hungary now faces a delicate balancing act, trying to maintain its sovereignty while remaining within key Western alliances. At the same time, Hungary has delayed Sweden's NATO membership, citing national security concerns. Many speculate that this hesitation is influenced by Hungary's complex ties with Russia and Sweden's vocal criticism of Hungary's democratic practices. The delay is seen as a calculated signal. Hungary is not willing to be pressured by EU expectations and prefers to assert its independence in foreign policy decisions. Simultaneously, Hungary is deepening its relationship with China, becoming the only EU member state to fully support the Belt and Road Initiative. This alignment has brought in significant investments in infrastructure, technology, and education, positioning Hungary as a strategic link between Europe and Asia. In 2022 alone, Chinese investments in Hungary exceeded $1 billion, especially in transportation and energy sectors. While this brings economic opportunities, it also introduces potential vulnerabilities, as growing dependence on Chinese capital may allow Beijing to exert influence over Hungary's political direction. Critics warn that these ties could compromise Hungary's sovereignty in the long run. Hungary's increasing alignment with Russia, China, and the BRICS bloc reflects a larger trend in global politics, a shift away from traditional Western alliances. BRICS, with its expanding membership and push for alternative financial systems, is reshaping the global landscape, and Hungary appears eager to be part of this transformation. By aligning itself with emerging powers, Hungary is challenging the dominance of Western institutions and signaling that it is open to new forms of global cooperation. This move could inspire other EU countries, particularly those harboring Eurosceptic views, to reconsider their roles within the Union. Rising dissatisfaction with the EU in countries like Poland and Italy mirrors some of Hungary's own concerns about national sovereignty and Brussels' centralized decision-making. As these sentiments grow, the unity of the EU may come under pressure, and the bloc's future could be marked by political fragmentation and realignment. Hungary's bold approach is already testing the limits of collective European identity, and if others follow suit, the EU may be forced to re-examine its foundational principles. Economically, Hungary's partnerships with China and Russia offer immediate gains, new infrastructure projects, job creation, and technological development, but they also carry long-term risks. Should global markets shift or political alliances change, Hungary's reliance on these partners could backfire, potentially leading to economic isolation from the EU. This is a real possibility if Hungary's policies continue to diverge from the Union's broader strategic direction. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has made it clear that Hungary will not compromise on issues like energy independence and military strategy. His firm stance on national sovereignty, even in the face of EU criticism or sanctions, shows Hungary's willingness to forge its own path, regardless of external pressure. However, this could lead to further isolation within Europe and increased dependency on Eastern partners, placing Hungary in a geopolitically precarious position. As the global power structure evolves, Hungary is positioning itself as a potential pivot point between East and West. Its decisions will not only shape its own future, but may also influence the trajectory of the European Union and the broader international order. The path Hungary takes, whether it leads to greater influence or growing marginalization, will depend on how it manages the complex web of alliances it is weaving. Ultimately, Hungary's pivot toward BRICS and its partnerships with China and Russia are more than just diplomatic moves. They reflect a fundamental challenge to the global status quo, signaling a desire for a new kind of multipolar world. As the EU and other Western powers reassess their roles, Hungary's actions may serve as a bellwether for broader changes to come. Whether this shift leads to a reimagined global order or leaves Hungary more isolated remains to be seen. But what is clear is that the dynamics of power in the 21st century are rapidly changing, and Hungary is right at the center of it.